As always, great to see you.
Yes, fantastic to be here on another wonderful day.
There you go. Oh well, I mean, let's start with the wonderful day. What was your day like? We had nonstop rain for the last almost 24 hours.
We're getting the same remnants of Hurricane Burrell as well. I think we're
Yeah,
getting a little less than the lakeshore folks that you guys are getting.
yeah.
Um, I'm actually scheduled to golf in a couple hours, and I think I might put my swim trunks on instead. I think it'll be pretty close to that. It's
Oh, yeah.
some of the golf courses in the area have actually closed for the day
Ah,
because there's so much rain. It's just
yeah. Well, I came into the office. I'm in the institute's office, not at home, my home office, and there's the Black Creek that flows behind the building here, and it's high. And if we get more rain, it'll probably flood. So, and this area is known for flooding. So yeah, it was pretty spectacular. Sadly, unfortunately, I have no idea. I won't see him until next week, but somebody I know had their group reunion. They all went to school together. They all grew up in Woodstock and so on and so forth. And every year they go camping up in Kincardine. And they went up on Tuesday night and the rain
perfect.
started Tuesday night.
It's
They
great
went,
camping weather.
oh, I
Love
thought,
camping in the rain.
oh, you do?
Oh,
Oh,
yes. No bugs.
okay, no bugs. All right.
Positive side of it.
You're talking about, not all of them would be intense. Some of them have campers because they have children, but still, I mean, if it starts raining, I have camped in the rain. I have gone canoeing in the rain. I have done this. I will never do it again, but there.
See, I do it by choice. I'm happy to go canoeing and long trips in the pouring, driving rain,
Hmm.
in headwinds in like 3 degrees Celsius. I just finished one in May in the Churchill River in
Yeah.
northern Manitoba.
Hmm.
And, it was 3 to 4 degrees Celsius, wet and rainy for the first 3 days.
Okay, let's look at that as a matter of choice and
Yeah.
in context. Why? Uh,
The trip is an annual trip plan. So we go knowing that the weather may not be cooperative, but we go anyhow. Right. So it's
mhm,
a group of us that get together every year and do an epic backcountry canoe trip. And
mhm.
so this time of year in northern Saskatchewan or northern BC, whatever the trip may be, it's going to be cold. But we choose this time of year because there's no bugs. You're not getting eaten alive by deer flies and various other things. But you do accept the fact. So I have a great saying is there's no such thing as bad weather. There's just bad equipment. So we have a fantastic time. We're dry, we're warm, we're well fed, and we have a great enjoyment in the driving, pouring rain because we're properly equipped for the environment we're in.
That raises a whole spectrum of things that we can discuss. Everything from a matter of choice
Yeah.
within a context. So one of the we could use the term constraints, but it isn't a constraint. It's more a I don't know. Well, we'll call it context for lack of a word right now. We'll probably get to a better term by the time we finish. The other is the what goes into making it enjoyable isn't just the choice, but it's also the preparedness. It's being prepared
Yeah.
for that time of year to do that kind of an event in order to avoid certain other things and look at the various aspects of decision making right there.
Yep. And it's like it's another prime example is we have Blues Fest going on in Ottawa right now. And
Mhm,
last night the stages were open, driving, pouring rain.
mhm.
You can go to Blues Fest prepared for the environment and have a wonderful evening, or you can go to Blues Fest ill prepared without thinking your way through ahead of time and have a horrible experience. That is a choice that
Yeah,
individuals make.
yeah.
I talk about that a lot. And what I do is that the choice to do something ill prepared is a choice in of itself, is a
Well,
decision,
yeah, yeah.
right? And people don't logically think connect the dots in their head. Well, I'm going to go do something. I'm not prepared for it, but I'm going to do it anyhow. They don't think through that process,
Yeah.
but they do it. It's kind of um, unconscious decision making. I guess they just deliberate. I'm not sure the exact phraseology for it, but
Mm-hmm.
we have a regular process. We know what we're getting into. We know that the weather is likely to be uncooperative. Our enjoyment not comes from the weather. Our enjoyment comes from the experience, the camaraderie, and the people that are there.
Okay.
The
Okay.
preparedness allows us to enjoy that more, irrespective of the circumstances imposed upon us by the weather.
Mm.
I can't control the weather, but I can control how well I'm prepared to deal with it.
Okay. Okay. It goes back to the a quote that I often use, often enough attributed to football coaches, and that is life is 10% situation, 90% how you handle it.
Yeah.
And so handling it is the choice or a series of choices. It's never just one choice. It's a whole series of choices with consequences. And so, you and I think in one of our sessions ended with some insights or at least some questions around freedom. What constitutes
Yeah.
freedom?
Yeah.
Freedom isn't just choosing A or B. And this, I think, is one of the issues that we have in our current culture. And I discussed this or had this discussion with a colleague this morning here in the office, and that is we actually suffer from abundance. And it is a suffering. People,
Yeah.
people don't understand that. It is a
Yeah.
suffering. It leads to inertia. It leads to too much. It also leads to feeding that need for more. Or once you have some, then you want more. Because we're never sure in an abundant, overabundant context whether we've A, made the right decision, or B, made the final decision, because there's so many options out there. It's how many things do you need to buy from Temu at a cheap price before you decide I don't need this anymore, or it doesn't fit, or whatever. And that in itself is interesting. It is a choice, but is it freedom? Um, there's that great, you and I shared this, George Carlin in one of the interviews from many years ago, he being one of my favorite people, despite the language he uses so virulently.
Yeah.
He made a distinction between illusion of choice and freedom of choice. And as he said, we have the illusion that we have freedom because there's so much we can choose from. But that's not actual freedom. How many bagels with or without seeds, with or without cream cheese, with or without whatever, do you really need?
How many permutations and commutations?
Exactly. I mean, I tell the story on occasion of a friend of mine was spending a weekend at my place, and she and her husband still live in Vancouver. Their daughter was going to Ryerson, or what is now called Metropolitan University, and locating here. So she came for the weekend in order to ensure that her daughter was, in an apartment sharing with the right people, and so on and so forth. What parents go through when their only and first child goes running off somewhere, without intentionally running away from them, but running away from them.
Doing it anyhow. Yeah.
Yeah, of course, without admitting it.
Yep.
And so she was in my place, and she stayed in my place over the weekend. And I asked her, is there anything I could get her? And these are West Coasters. West Coast people have a culture about, we need everything pure. We need everything that,
Oh yeah.
isn't tainted, doesn't have, bugs in it, or whatever the hell else you put into it, isn't GMO, isn't this, isn't that. And I go, really? Okay, moving right along. So she said, oh, why don't you get me some yogurt? I said, fine, great. knowing full well that this is a West Coast kind of idea. Yogurt isn't just yogurt.
No,
It's
no, not at
yogurt.
all. No.
It's yogurt with a special twist to it. So I said, what kind? She said, whatever this percent. Fine. Don't ask. I don't eat yogurt unless it's Greek. And so I went to the local grocery store, and there is the display case.
The wall of yogurt. Yeah. Oh, it's true.
Jeff, I stood there because I don't usually buy it, and I started muttering to myself in a fairly loud stage whisper,
Yep.
going, what the? And I won't add the words. And I was actually stymied
Yeah.
by the abundance of choice.
Decision
And
paralysis. Yep.
oh, totally. I was paralyzed. What was even more interesting was the people around me were now making large, going out of their way to skirt coming anywhere near me
Yep.
because I was now talking to myself
Right. About the yogurt.
about the frickin' yogurt.
Yep. Yep.
So here I am paralyzed. There I am paralyzed. There's a whole community of people now thinking I'm crazy because this man's talking to himself about yogurt.
Yep.
And I thought, talk about the wave effect. Just like this just got bigger and bigger and bigger until it almost became a tsunami all around me. I go, this is ridiculous. I finally chose yogurt. I put it in the refrigerator, and the way I chose the yogurt was I don't give a damn. Just went this and this. And then I asked her, I said, is the yogurt okay? Her response was almost.
Yep. Yep.
There's
Yep.
no winning here.
No, and nor can you throw them off a second story balcony and get the effect you're looking for, right? I mean, decision paralysis. It's crazy because the illusion of freedom, people want the sense that they're making the choice.
Yes.
Except when they have a very specific set of options that are predetermined by somebody else. You're simply selecting from that. And the argument that I put into the discussion on freedom is also the decision, the ability to not make a decision.
Yes.
To not choose.
Yes.
Right? Everybody seems to think if I'm going to vote Republican or Democrat in the US or conservative or liberal in Canada, those are my choices.
Right.
Right? Anything else I vote is really just a different shade of the same thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, I also have the choice of not making a choice. Part of the freedom is I'm not required to make a decision,
Right.
or I'm not required. The other aspect that I see a lot on X, Twitter about is I'm going to make a decision, but I don't need to tell you about it.
Yes.
And this is I just find we have a propensity to want to inform the world about the freedom we have and the choices we make. Yay, I have the freedom to choose which yogurt, and I choose 10% Yoplait Greek vanilla flavor.
Right.
Why are you telling anybody?
Yes.
Like, why?
Yes.
Why? Why do you need to tell the world that you've made a choice?
Yes. Yes. What?
So you're not making the choice. You're looking for likes, clicks, and support for the choice you're making. You're looking for reinforcement.
Yes.
Choice.
Yes. Yes. Which actually undermines any sense of freedom to begin with, because what you're really after is not the choice or what it is you can choose from an array of opportunities or possibilities. It's about garnering affirmation. That we are in a totally different world.
Oh, and it's almost like we're seeking membership in a certain club or a certain level or a niveau or a certain stage of society. And so, what do I say when I don't want to live in an urban world, right? I don't want to live on top of my neighbors, right? I want to live in a single family home on a half to a full acre. That's an appropriate density of humans for me. But I mean, in today's world, I'm then, when I say that openly, I'm open to being part of the problem because I don't want to live in a high density walkable
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
neighborhood, right? So do
Yeah.
I really have the freedom,
Yeah. Right.
right? Do I
Right.
really have the freedom to make the choice, right? If nobody's building it, how do I buy it?
Well, among the other things around that is, let's just take that example of where we choose to live. It's one thing for us to say, or you to say, or for me to say, I'm going to live in this particular area, in this particular way. It's a way of life. For me, what would undermine that particular choice is if then I went out and told everybody what I did. It's none
Yeah.
of your freaking business.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's it's like, excuse me, like, why would I tell you what my life choices are around where I choose to live? I have very specific, like you, I have, and probably like everybody else, we have very specific motivations and reasons for
Yeah.
living in a certain way. It's called way of life.
Yeah.
And there's the freedom. It's the way of life approach to things. I don't have to tell you, and I don't have to tell anybody.
Nor do you have
Uh,
to justify it to anybody is another
Uh,
avenue that,
well, well, that becomes the old, the added motive. Why would I feel the need to tell anybody if I need justification or affirmation, or what am I seeking here? It's that, question around what motivates us? Why do we do certain things? Why do we say certain things? Why do we communicate? Not in a certain way. It's not about how we do things. It's about why we do things.
yeah,
That's the critical issue here.
it is. And I did a podcast episode and wrote something a couple of weeks ago on how would you introduce yourself if you didn't have societal norms? So how would you introduce yourself? When I was in the military, I was Major Donaldson. The fact that my first name was Jeff was lost on a lot of people, really didn't matter. My introduction to anybody else was my rank, name, and position, what I held, right? When I'm a professor, I'm Dr. Jeff Donaldson, an adjunct faculty at whatever. But if none of that cultural things were there, how would you introduce yourself? How would you present yourself to a random stranger? And my
Mhm,
episode was entitled, Hi, I'm Jeff, the Backcountry Paddler.
mhm,
Because to
mhm.
me, other than being, father, husband, all the family roles, other than for me as an individual, that's the biggest piece of who I am. So how would you present yourself? But we don't do that. We describe ourselves
Yes,
in societal norms and
yes,
structures that are generally
yes,
accepted.
yes,
Position, title, it's about how we see ourselves, our role in
yes,
society, our level of importance, our level of responsibility.
yeah,
But how would you introduce yourself if you didn't have
yeah.
a cultural norm?
Interesting you say that, because when I first started in the business world and left academics, I have credentials that you know weigh my business card down. It's just ridiculous, so I don't use them.
Yeah.
And I may have mentioned this at one point. And it dawned on me very early on that there's a specific reason why I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't use what would be the norms of society, having gotten all of these titles. All right,
Yeah.
we'll call them titles. Because I found that as a newbie or a new person in a new field, going into business, coming out of academics, the academic um, career had value and still has value that is personal. It's not part of my social status. And it actually became even more important because I discovered very early on, as soon as you're in business, not in academics, but in business, and you have PhD after your name, you're put up on a pedestal, right? And the expectation of someone who has not gone through that process, we'll call it a process, is that you know everything, right? It doesn't matter what it is, but from their point of view, you're the be all and end all. Some of it is based on envy. They already envy you, and therefore, because that pedestal is actually part of a shooting gallery, you become the objective of people's criticism because you actually admit that maybe you don't know something
Yeah.
and you're not
Yeah.
allowed to do that.
Yeah.
I actually had a fight with somebody on one of the boards that I was on as the employee over that one. You're expected to, create miracles, turn water into wine, do the Jesus thing all the time, walk on water. Why? Because you've got these credentials that makes you for some people different from us. For others, it's better than us. There's always that judgment in there.
There's and it's the lens you look through. I call it the differentiator, right? So a good friend of mine that finished his PhD right around a little earlier than I did went to be into full-time academia and in university and PEI. Fantastic human being, wonderful guy. But he doesn't use PhDs. Like, why? Everybody here has one. Like you wouldn't be in this job if you
Yeah,
didn't
that's right.
have one. So why would I? So it wasn't an active membership. I didn't need to have PhD to
Yeah,
be a
yeah.
member of that because everybody was there. And then it's a differentiator. So in a world of nauseating levels of post nominals, let's call it that, after some people, and questionable whether they're really post nominals or personal creations, what is the differentiator
Yes.
that makes you stand out, right? Like some would argue I could read 2 textbooks and get an MBA in a weekend,
Mhm.
but that misses the whole social context and networking part of MBAs, right? So
Exactly.
that doesn't make sense. But if I'm in an accounting world, everybody has a CFA,
Hope
right?
so.
Otherwise you wouldn't be there, right? So what's your differentiator that separates you, right? I have not a huge amount of post nominals, but a reasonable amount that would tip my business card in one direction away from my
Yeah,
name. But
yeah,
I only use the one
yeah,
that is a differentiator
yeah.
within the industry that I'm in.
Yeah.
But I have been, you know, PhD piled high deeper is what I've been accused. I've had people say that's not very intelligent for somebody who apparently, has a PhD.
Oh, I've seen that. I've faced that.
And I get that a lot. And I'm
Oh,
like,
yeah.
dude, the PhD is a differentiator, but that thing was 5.5 years of my life to earn. Um,
Oh,
Thank
yes.
you very much.
Yes.
I'm unapologetically using that. I'm not better than you are. I'm not
Yeah.
smarter than you are,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I have a differentiator,
Right.
right? A friend of mine has now I'm going to get this wrong. It's a class certificate in wildland urban interface firefighting.
Oh,
It's a
wow.
rare thing to have. Anyhow, he's the guy that instructs the instructors.
Okay.
So a train the trainer qualification.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And he said he leaves all the other ones out. He puts those couple of letters after his name
Right.
because in any conversation related to the industry within he's in, there's there's a context, but people pause before they say, hey, you're supposed to know something better because you're so
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
you have
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
differentiator,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But this opens the whole discussion about the lens. Do we do things for other people's support, other people's uh
Yep.
or do
Yeah.
we do it to show that I'm smarter and better and look what I've accomplished and you haven't? Or is it okay that we actually do it for a reasonable purpose that
Yeah.
has no malintent?
Right.
Why does everybody continually try to determine what our true intent, our true motivation is?
Yes.
You know, there's always this thought process that everybody you come across seems to have this underlying intent that they're pursuing, that it's pretty
Yes.
important for you to determine what that is um ahead of time, and figure it out so you understand why they're doing what they're doing. And I'm like, no,
Yeah.
no, like quick example. I'm on a national panel coming up on the 23rd to talk about with the Canadian Journal of Emergency Management and the Disaster Recovery Institute to talk about humanitarian workforce in Canada, the role of volunteers in supporting disaster recovery and response in Canadian communities. Uh, I said to the guy, I said, put, just put PhD at the end of my name, or doctor in front of it, right? It's part of the credentialing, and
Right. Right.
we get into the meet and greet section of this thing. Like, this is just where all the panelists are getting together to talk about it. He's consistently calling me Dr. Donaldson, Dr. Donaldson, Dr. Donaldson. I'm like, dude, that's for the marketing piece.
Yes.
I'm not the arrogant arse that wants to be called doctor every time I step up on a stage.
Yes.
But I'm like, okay, then I rolled it back and I realized it's how I presented it to
Yes.
him
Yeah.
that he took that away
Yes.
as I want to be addressed by my
That's right.
appropriate title.
Right.
I couldn't be farther from the truth. It was a
Right.
marketing thing.
Right. Right. Interesting you say that, because part of the reason I don't use my credentials is because they have absolutely nothing to do with anything that I do in work. Period. Full stop. What is a doctorate in medieval studies going to do in the world of logistics and supply chain? Zip. Take my word for it. Never mind. Contemporary existential phenomenology as a philosophical understanding of life and death. And you go, whoa, okay, we know you're weird, Victor.
Oh, I got to read that one.
Well, you don't want to read that. I don't want to read that one. Beside, never mind. I'm going to stop right there before it becomes, oh, well, let's lecture on what that means. And I can. But what it is the disconnect between what I do now and what I did then. And the disconnect is content-wise. It's very specific from that point of view. The connection is the ability to think, and to think strategically.
Yeah.
Well, why do you think the Logistics Institute and all of its programs are competency-based? It's because I had to extrapolate what was significant in terms of my own personal education that would be meaningful to anybody who is struggling with their own approach to identity. We'll use the identity word, right? And it's not about being smarter than anybody else. It's about, how do you think? How do you rationalize? How do you come to a decision? What are the factors that you take into account? When I talk about complexity, it's because it isn't the dumbing down that we need to do, which is what education does for us. You become very specific in your approach. It's actually trying to get us to go from that core and realizing that there's so much more to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I tell people who go through education, what should I study? What should I study? Choose what you love. Doesn't really matter, right? I did literature. Who are you kidding? And philosophy and religious studies. That's not going to get me a job unless I become, a pastor priest. That ain't going to happen. I'd have to be a believer. Never mind, not having lightning hit the front of the church as I walked in. I would have to become somebody who goes through an academic career, and I chose not to for all kinds of reasons. And it isn't the content of what you study that's important, though it is. It should give you love of learning. It's about the love of learning that should make you and give you the capability to do anything. You know, when people say you're born in a country that where you can become anybody you want, even if you were in America, in the United States, president of the United States. No, actually, you can't become anything you want unless you choose yourself and choose for yourself what it is you want to do that you love. Then you become anything you want.
What you have is the opportunity to
Yes,
become everything you want. It's the
that's
difference
right.
between guaranteed outcomes and guaranteed opportunity.
There
In this
is no
country,
guaranteed anything. No.
right? You have a guarantee to pursue the opportunity, but
Yes.
there is absolutely no confirmation that you will
Not.
reach what you want. Even no matter how much you love it or how much you're dedicated to it or how much energy you throw at it, there's still no guarantee that you will get what you want, but you are likely to get far further along than if you sit around and wait for somebody to come along and hand you the
Oh,
platter.
exactly. You know, I sent you some PowerPoints, and one of them is as you responded or reacted rightly. That was a pretty deep dive into those things. We're not touching that, but I'm looking at the on the other screen. You know, freedom of choice. The very first line says, "It's our opportunity and autonomy."
Yep. Yep.
And there's freedom.
Yeah.
It's the autonomy. I'm making the choice, which then is my responsibility, because it's autonomy isn't just, oh, I'm going to do anything I damn well please. No, no, no. There's responsibility that's associated with that autonomous decision, but it's also being in a context where opportunity is available. It's what I described as luck in a previous discussion we had, and that is everybody has luck. Everybody has opportunity presented to them. Some embrace it, some ignore it.
Yep.
And if you ignore it, then you're the unlucky one. If you embrace it, whether you succeed or by somebody's estimation, that's the other thing is, you know, who judges what success is? You know, if you succeed or you at least go down the road of opportunity, then you're the lucky one.
Yeah. One of the things that I always love to debate with people on autonomy is that one of the things we're famous for talking about in society is everybody has rights. But what we
Okay.
don't talk about is the corresponding obligations and responsibilities
Exactly,
that are
exactly,
required. Because a
exactly.
right doesn't exist unless it's accompanied with a responsibility.
Yes.
It can't, the two of them must go hand in hand for the logical statement to be true. You
Yes.
have a responsibility. If you have, for example, the right to not be assaulted on the streets of Toronto, you also have a responsibility attached to that to
Yes.
behave in accordance with the rules that are assigned to your population, etc. Right? We have a responsibilities like you. We don't talk about that. Everybody's happy to talk about the rights, but nobody wants to talk about the responsibilities and obligations that are tied to that. For example, I'm a Canadian citizen. To be a Canadian citizen, there are obligations that I must uphold that go along with that. Now, there's no there's no penalty for not because we don't believe in stateless people, so the government's not going to send me packing and remove my citizenship. Actually, the Canadian government doesn't even recognize denouncing citizenship as a
No.
thing.
No.
Um, Other countries do. You can
Hmm.
get rid of your citizenship, but Canadian, even if I got a different citizenship and denounced, I couldn't really legally get rid of it. But we don't talk about the obligations we have. We want perfect autonomy, and this is where you get some of the let's call it the edge, the far left and the far right
Yes.
definitions of what
Yes.
freedom means.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
the extremes, that's the word I was looking for. The extremes definitions of freedom is I'm absolutely able to do anything I want, as long as I don't harm anybody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a pretty wide interpretation
Mhm.
if you choose to want to live in a collective society.
Exactly. Exactly. Because it's, hmm, we live in a world of categories and boxes. And we put everything into a box. And we often enough include ourselves in
Mhm.
that box. This is my autonomy box. Okay. And I am now immune from everything else outside of that box. I can now do what I want. Well, my response to that is yes, you're absolutely correct. So long as you stay inside the box.
Yeah. Yeah.
The minute you walk out and you go somewhere else and encounter anything else other than what's in the box, sorry, you now have responsibilities. And by the way, staying in the box, inside the four walls, where you're completely, totally autonomous, you also have responsibility to ensure that you're going to survive inside
Mhm.
the box. Okay. It gets us into almost a discussion of survivalists versus the prepper versus the survivalist.
Yeah.
And I find it fascinating because this is new to me. I never thought of myself as either one or the other. I'm definitely not a survivalist. You're not going to get me. I'm not Bear Grylls going out, climbing walls and eating grubs and, biting the head off of a lizard. And excuse me. The closest
I've
I
never
get.
eaten lizard, but I hear they taste very well.
No, thank you. I've
It's like
had,
chicken.
no, yeah, everything's like chicken, which is the other big lie, because there's
Yeah.
nothing that tastes like chicken.
No,
Everything
no.
tastes like all of the spices we use in order to kill the taste of what it is we're eating. So that's why it all tastes like chicken.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Because we've deadened our palate to what it actually tastes like. You know, no. I'm not going to go around, biting heads off lizards, so on and so forth. I don't even think they're cute. So let's move on.
No. But when I created this as part of my research, I created this 5-step process or 5 level of where people fall in society. And I actually rate your level of preparedness based upon your dependency on the collective system. Right? So are you the first rate one I call blissfully unaware? People who just run around totally unaware of the world around them. We all know who they are. They're either totally ignorant or they're intentionally ignoring. Sometimes we're not sure what the answer to that question is, but they're just blissfully unaware. Then
And
you have,
you are talking about adults. You're not talking
oh
about.
yeah, no, I'm talking about adults, not
Oh yeah,
kids.
okay.
Kids are
5-year-olds, I
naturally,
understand.
oh
Blissfully
yeah,
aware is great.
oh yeah. When we get to the next stage, we talk about the government dependent folks. These are the folks that are slightly aware that the world can get a little pear-shaped, can be a little bit disruptive, but
Yeah,
they have this irrational belief that the government's responsibility is to protect and save them. And
yeah,
so they rely on them heavily. And when it never works out the way they want it to work out, they're the ones, the first one to your CTV microphone complaining about the fact that their power isn't back on 6 hours later and
yeah,
who dropped the ball, who's getting fired for this,
yeah,
things like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
The middle stage is your prepared individual. And this is what I try to educate people to be. It's understanding your exposure to and dependency on the collective system. So power, health, water,
yeah,
logistics, machinery, whatever it may
yeah,
be,
yeah.
healthcare system, food, and then
Mhm.
understanding that periodically those sectors of critical infrastructure are not available. And what are you going to do to navigate those disruptions? Where we get into the prepper world, and this is where my definition differs from what you hear in mainstream media, is a prepper is an individual who has the ability to replicate a key uh, part of critical infrastructure for an extended period of time. So they'd be somebody who could generate power for the next 70 days, 80
Okay,
days, 90 days.
okay,
They think a lot more about a potential
yeah,
significant event, though preppers, in my definition sense, don't hold the belief that society is going to collapse.
okay,
but they do believe it's likely to come to its knees for a
Okay.
significant period of time before it recovers. And hence, they're going beyond 72 hours, going beyond 2 weeks. They're looking at being able to provide food, water, shelter, and power to their family for 3, 4, 5 months in the future
Okay.
until
Yep.
society, gets itself back up and running again. The survivalist is the individual who believes that societal collapse is coming and that society won't recover and we're going to return to a tribalist nature.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be small groups of tribes trading and bartering. Money won't exist. The government really won't exist. And we're going to go back to an old tribal type society.
Mm-hmm.
These individuals have the ability to permanently provide for themselves, irrespective of external events or government intervention. So this would be the individual that has your off-grid yurt with his farm. It
Sorry.
literally has the
Oh yeah.
ability, other than surgical intervention, and this is the one I use all the time when everybody says I'm self-sufficient. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, you're not. You're
Yeah.
self-reliant, but you can't do
Yes.
surgical intervention on yourself. Short of
Ah.
trauma surgery, these people do not need governments and they don't need external support. And so there's actually a psychological piece of literature out there or a body of work that talks about they want the world to look like how they've chosen to live,
Mm.
not so they're hoping for a societal collapse to bring everybody down to the way they live because they see everybody else as over consuming, as destroying the planet,
Mm.
as being, enemies of nature. And so they're looking for that. So it's very interesting. But I like to look at it on a prepper sense as somebody that thinks that there probably and likely is going to be an event that's going to cause significant disruption. So if you could imagine a lawless Toronto for 2 months before they get a handle on it. What does that place look like? How are you going to navigate Toronto when there's no 911 available and the power's out for 2 months?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, we've all seen movies about that. We've read books about that,
Okay.
of what blackout in places like that look. And there's a great phrase that I use that's, I wrote it down. There's a direct correlation between our access to resources and our adherence to the moral code. So we live in a collective society and we follow the rules. I argue that that is directly related to our access to resources. As soon as people become hungry and you're eating and they're not, they will come get food. They will not stay starving. So as long as everybody has access to just enough resources
Mm-hmm.
to stave off the initiative to break the moral code, everybody follows the rules.
Are you familiar with Cormac McCarthy, the American author,
No,
novelist?
no.
Okay, he's the one who wrote his books, by the way, are absolutely stunning. They're beautiful, beautifully written. He wrote the book The Road, which became the movie. Um,
I have seen the movie yet.
the movie is got its moments, but the book is so sparsely written that you actually have to pause after every 2 pages to stop and think. That's how powerful it is. And he is one of my favorite contemporary authors. If you've never done any of his Blood Meridian, any of his books, he's got the horse trilogy is to die for. All the Pretty Horses, and so on and so forth. It's just absolutely gorgeous. And what's interesting about The Road, beside it's so utterly hopeless. Right? It is the movie is black. That's so
Yeah.
black.
Yeah.
Yet at the same time, it's a movie about love.
Mm-hmm.
And you go, and it's a book about love. well, wait a minute, in an absolutely hopeless situation, what is it that causes us to survive, at least to the point? I won't give the book away in case somebody has never read it. I strongly suggest you do. The movie comes close enough to it. It really is about the love between the father and the son. And among the many things I think about when it comes to choice, freedom, survival, not in the categories that you mentioned, preparedness, prepper, you're much more refined than I am around that. Really, what is the requisite for us as humans to meet all of our needs is love and belonging. Love, however one defines it or understands it, however intimate or otherwise, but it's the belongingness, right? We will, as humans, meet what is understood as the 5 basic human needs: survival, love and belonging, power, freedom, and fun.
Yep.
But it's the love and belongingness that is prerequisite for all the others.
And it is. And when you look at even the TV show Alone, I don't know if you ever saw it on the History Channel, the survival one that they do.
Yes. Yes.
Everybody that goes out there and is chosen is an expert. So every one of them have the requisite skills to survive. The ones who tap out and give up, it's because they miss their family and it's a mental health thing. Every once in a while, somebody gets injured, fair enough. But the reason people call to get pulled out of the game is it's a mental health challenge. Humans are not designed to be solitary lone wolf animals.
Right.
Which is why in the preparedness space, when people talk about being lone wolf, they're likely not to survive very long because you can't survive on your own. And when I study, and this shock you, these statistics usually shock people, that what's the number one variable related to disaster recovery? People would think it's your financial ability. It's your financial. No, it's not. It's your sense of connectedness to your community.
Yes.
So the number one community that responds and recovers and builds back faster is, to use the colloquial term, the working poor. That the people, not the welfare recipients, the one step above. So the working poor who have certain cultures. If you've seen a public park on a Saturday and a barbecue,
yes,
that's a sense of belonging. That's a sense of place. It's a sense of membership. That's what leads to faster, better recoveries post-disaster, not money.
No.
It's not money. It's not the value, the size of your bank account. It's not the influence. It's the strength of your community to which you belong. It is such a powerful and influential force that I serve on the board of directors for the International Social Capital Association. So it's an eclectic group of us researchers from around the world that look at the power of human relationships in all fields. So we have people from economics, people from behavioral sciences, myself from emergency management, people in computer science even, and we study the power of human relationships and how that fosters the flow of other capital. So you and I have a relationship, which means because we have a reasonably trusting relationship, other capitals can flow. Human capital, financial capital, physical capital can flow along that relationship that you and I have built. But if I came up to you out of the blue and asked to borrow your rake and you had never seen me before, even if I'm on your street, you're probably not going to loan me your rake. But if I was your neighbor or the person down the street and I waved to you all the time and we built a relationship and I asked for the rake, I'm probably going to get that rake. And you're probably not going to be worried about tonight whether that rake's coming back.
Right.
That's the power of human relationships.
Yeah.
And it is such influential to disaster outcomes. And to why people survive,
Yeah, yeah,
why people get up and keep fighting, especially in today's pressing economic conditions. Why do people keep fighting?
yeah. It touches on what we talk about at the Logistics Institute and our strategic leadership programs of the inverted triangle of success. Strategy is where do you want to go? Process is how are you going to get there? But at the
Yep.
bottom of the triangle, which is the focal point, the fulcrum, if you will, it's people.
Yep.
And that is, from a business point of view, who's actually driving the bus. But it goes beyond that. Businesses do not succeed because they have strategies. Okay. They don't even succeed because they have great processes. They succeed because they have people.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't matter where you want to go in the marketplace. And by the way, market competitiveness, if that's your strategy, is to, be competitive in the market, whether it's your product or your service or whatever it is, you also need people. I hate to tell you. I mean,
Yeah.
who the hell is buying your shit?
Yep. And people
You know?
buy from people they trust.
And there's the factor. It's about trust. Why do we go into the same stores in the same neighborhoods where we live? Okay, convenience. No two ways about it. But convenience, the other side of that coin of convenience is trust. I know what I'm about to get. I know that when I go into this store in order to buy my veggies, let's put it to you that way, there are days and times when I'll go in and say, okay, I need something because I have to cook, I have to eat, damn it. I can't keep going out to eat and I'll look like, something I don't even want to talk about in terms of width. It's a case of we will make a decision, sometimes based on price, sometimes based on quality, sometimes based on accessibility, sometimes based on availability. And all of those words actually revolve around this one other word, which is I trust what I'm getting.
Yep.
I trust where I am.
Yep.
And I always find it fascinating where, when the trust breaks down, whether it's a social or systemic or whatever, that's when the grumbling starts. And that's when the grumbling goes to the next level. If we were to take the electoral processes around the world, if we avoid the US show right now, let's just call it a show. Let's say France. All right. France was on the verge of going extreme right wing. And what I love about the French is they don't hide anything. It's in
No.
your face.
Oh, yes.
Le Pen is in your face. She was very obvious what it is she stands for.
Yep.
Period. There is no mistaking what it is she stands for. And to have in the first level or round, if you will, of elections, to have them come front and center, what did it do? It galvanized everybody else into saying, whoa, wait a minute, we can't have this. Now, where they're going into the future, who knows? If he's left, I love the dichotomies of right and left. Give me a break. I don't care whether you're right or you're left, whatever your extremism is, you still have to get up in the morning. You still have to put your trousers on in a certain way. You still have to do your toiletries. You still have to do the human things. And damn it, you better have some coffee.
Yeah.
Right? Before you leave the house. Otherwise you're going to kill somebody on the way to wherever. And so there are certain functionalities and the obvious things that we do, which are categorized almost as meaningless choices. We just do them.
Yep.
But they're choices. And then there are the meaningful ones where we say, whoa, wait a minute, hold on, what just happened? Now I have responsibility. We have responsibility with the meaningless choices as well, right? Meaningless choices could be something as simple as, do you start your walk off with your right foot or your left foot? Most of us don't even pay attention, right? That's what makes it meaningless. But our body is attuned to start in a certain way.
Yep.
Our body is making the choice. How, why? Out of habit, for example. Simple as that. It's almost musculature, our muscles on one side of us is going to initiate how we walk.
It's like decision paralysis that that Steve Jobs used to talk about why he wears a uniform, or why he wore a uniform was by making one decision, he avoids having to make 6,800 other decisions. Every day he wore a pair of blue jeans and a turtleneck. He ate the same thing for breakfast and the same thing for lunch. Like every day was so that he took that set of decisions out of his thought process and put them aside because he's never going to make them. He makes them once and never again. So, it does ease that decision burden, but most of us don't think that way.
Well, actually, if we don't have to do this, it's not confession. Our session is not confession. But if we actually think of how we start the day, and we think about it just on a daily basis, do an analysis. I know how I start each day.
Yeah.
I know what my body will do. If I have, it depends on what time I go to sleep. I either have 4 hours or 5 hours, or if I'm really tired, 6 hours, period. Forget the 8-hour nonsense. That doesn't happen to me at all. I really have to be sick if I'm going to be in bed for 8 hours. So generally, my body will automatically wake up after 4 hours. So I have to be careful when I go to bed. So I go to bed too early, I'm up 3 o'clock in the morning.
Let's go.
And I know there's nothing out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if I do go out there, I'm afraid of what I'm going to encounter. I am surrounded by skunks and other things. So never mind strange people. So I know I'll call it a habit. I know that if I go to bed at a certain time, I'll wake up at a certain time because my body will make a choice, because that is what it habitually does.
Yep.
Right. I actually try to leave the house every day around 6 in order to come to the office, if I'm coming to the office. Why? I want to avoid crowds. So there's a rationale.
Yep.
I thought this through. It isn't just, I have to do this at 6. I watch people running for the public transit. And I go, why are you running? Like, it's not the last bus out. There's going to be another one. Like, what's your problem? For me, I have the leisurely pace at 6 o'clock. There's not going to be a lot of people in the train or on the bus, and so on and so forth. But then I go and I arrive at the Runnymede station here in Toronto on the Bloor line. I go and buy my blueberry lemon scones. This is like absolute habit. I don't even think about it.
You just head for it.
I just go. I know exactly where it is. It's like I'm following my nose. There it is. I say hello to the same people. I get on the bus. I get into the office. I come into the building. I check the mail on the first floor in the mail room. Then I come upstairs, make a cup of coffee. I sit down and I have my coffee, my one and only coffee for the day. Now, you ask yourself, are you in a rut? Some would say yes. I would say I'm on autopilot.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't have to think about this. Okay.
Yeah.
And those are the meaningless choices and decisions that we make. Meaningless insofar as to reinforce the ordinariness of our lives. Right? But
And
then there are the other choices. Okay. You know, and I'm not even going to go into my own. It takes a deliberation, and it has to do with what do I want to do, how do I want to do it, and if I do it and I do it well, this is the consequence. If I don't do it and I do it badly, or I do it badly, this is the consequence. Now I'm in a whole nexus of decision making that deals with the how, the what, the how, and the outcome or consequence.
yeah. And when I remember sitting in the Logistics Institute in 20, now I'm going to date myself here, 2017 for the pilot SCR course.
Oh,
Was it
yes.
2017?
Yeah.
Anyhow, I was sitting there and one of the individuals there, I was having at that time I was considering I was retiring from the military. I didn't know whether I wanted to do an MBA, a second master's, or do a PhD. And one of the students was a lady from New York, from a design college.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh,
And we're
yeah.
sitting at the table, and
Yeah,
she
yeah.
looked at me. She said, "How many people do you know
Yeah.
that have an MBA?
Yeah.
And how many people do you know that has a PhD?"
Yeah.
And she said, "The next 4 years are going to pass by. You might as well have a PhD at the end of it." And just a simplistic thought of that is I had the option to go in several different directions.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
had chosen when I retired from the military to not continue working specifically and directly in the supply chain management field,
Right.
which I did for 20 years. And then I decided to move into emergency management. And so that decision process was not quick. It was very deliberate.
Yes.
It was an extended period of time. I actually started that process in 2012, sitting in Kabul, Afghanistan, through a whole bunch of other circumstances. But the idea is that we often think very low of our probable outcomes.
Yeah.
You know, we have this barrier, perceived barrier about it's too much work, it's too
Yes.
much process, it's
Yes.
too difficult.
Yes.
I have whatever socioeconomic barriers are real or actual or
Yes.
perceived.
Yes.
We have this difficulty in looking ourselves in the mirror and saying, I can write a book, I can earn my PhD, I can become a professor, I can
Yeah.
start a company,
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
launch an initiative. It's probably going to take me 6 or 7 years when we're traditionally wired in today's world to think about supper.
Yes.
So it's very difficult for
Yes.
people to
Yes.
deliberately think about a process that is years in the making with no guaranteed outcome. Am I going to invest the next 4 years in pursuing a PhD, knowing that 50% of people who start them don't finish them?
Yep. Yep.
Or would I just do something easier? And I see this a lot in retiring veterans who decide to take public service jobs. So they'll retire from the military in supply chain management, and then they'll get a job the next week with a government public service job doing the same thing in the same field. A very comfortable one cubicle to the next cubicle.
Mm-hmm.
I was Lieutenant Colonel so and so, and now I'm Mister.
Mm-hmm.
And they just stay in the world because we don't teach, we don't champion, we don't offer people the idea that this entire system is wide open for you to pursue, wide open for you to go after. And if because as Ryan Holiday famously says in his book, The Obstacle is the Way, it's we don't view obstacles as things that we can overcome.
Mhm,
We use them as decision stops.
mhm,
It's too hard to do this, so I'm not going to do it. We don't look at it as that looks like a very challenging path. How do I learn? What do I need to learn to navigate that path to reach where I'm going? We
mhm,
don't think that way. So
mhm,
somebody sitting here thinking in today's stressed economy who's applying to 300 jobs and getting no answer is
mhm,
apt to blame the system.
mhm,
They're
mhm.
apt to blame the lack of ability to get an interview, 300 different applications, nobody calling me back. They're not, we don't teach people to think that maybe it's the process I'm following that's the problem. Maybe this is not the route. Maybe there's a different way to do things.
Mhm.
And so that's one of my missions in what we do in my business is trying to break that barrier down to tell people actually, yeah, there is a reasonable way to introduce strategic thinking to a population that has never had that exposure, that has never thought about decisions beyond what you've said, the autonomous regular decisions, or maybe, what's my major going to be?
Mhm.
That sounds like a huge decision, but really you're already committed to a degree of a certain point. So you've already narrowed it. Like if you're in a
Right.
Bachelor of Science, what's my major? If you're in a Bachelor of Arts, what's my major? You're already in a Bachelor of Arts. So do you really have that significant of a decision? You
Yeah,
know?
yeah, 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 yeah. You know, I used to believe, and I still believe, actually, that one of the greatest motivators, most significant motivators, greatest, what's great about big, it's not the
Yeah.
biggest necessarily,
Large.
but it's the most significant motivator for us as humans, is fear. We actually are afraid. We're afraid of everything, and everything that we do, even the way we dress, even the way we attitude, we express ourselves in terms of attitude, is really the mask that we wear. As the Greeks would say, we all wear masks. That's even before Freud. We all wear masks. We take on personas, and uh, it's the persona that becomes the lie. There's one of my thesis in theology or religious studies. One of the books I still love to read is Ernst Becker's The Denial of Death. And he's was a psychiatrist, actually, an atheist psychiatrist who was dying of cancer. And this was his last book that he wrote. On his deathbed, actually, he was immobilized. And one of the things that he talks about is the fear mechanism of creating a persona. It is our fear
Yeah.
response to the uncontrollable realities around us, driven by that need to be in control. So, this gets right down to, what constitutes control. And it's embedded in our education system. Um, Control is about always being right. Control is about getting 100% on the exam. That's control.
Yeah.
What you do with it is irrelevant. Okay. The consequence is that we have, through the system, embedded fear as the driver of our decisions. Okay. Uh, Fear is real. No two ways about it. I mean, if someone's got a gun pointed at your head, you should be afraid. Let's not be stupid about this. But at the same time, there are those subtleties around fear that prevent us from making any kind of decision, right? So to be prepared, in the event that, is not tied to what the event is. You call it, you make it the distinction between, you say preparedness is a lifestyle, not a stockpile. I love that. Mind you, it sent me into a long riff on what the hell is a lifestyle,
That's a rabbit hole.
which we're not going down
No,
as we wrap this up. But it does say something about, what is core to our sense of who we are, both conscious and unconscious. It's the unconscious fears. We will become survivalists, not only because we want to be self-reliant, but we also want to destroy the infrastructure that's keeping everything alive. And so there's a fear mechanism in that. We're afraid of, which then leads into a distrust of. And a questioning goes beyond questioning, because if we look at some of the electoral processes, the political processes around the world, we see some of it can be very destructive. Having said that, we also have to ask ourselves, what is the way of life that we want to build? Notice I didn't say choose.
Build. Yeah.
It's a building
Create.
process.
Construct.
You're constructing it, you're creating it. It goes back to, much of the strategic thinking that I like to focus on when we talk about global supply chain and logistics. Yes, I know it sounds like I'm dealing with the sponsor right now, but at least we might as well get in there. And that is, we construct those things. We construct our strategy. Most of us, and you know this, your own experience, being in the supply side and the logistics side of military career, it's a process. You execute the process. You bring the ammunition from point A to point Z. Why? It's not the why. You don't have to ask the why. It's how you're going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? What I want people to understand or try to think about is the how we do it is, we've got that locked down. That's not the issue, right? Unless you really have a bad process, then you have an issue. But most people in our fields or in the fields, pretty good at process management. If they aren't, then they shouldn't be doing what they're doing. What is, I think, more important is asking, why do we do it this way? What is the possibility? What are the opportunities and possibilities of doing it differently? And if so, what are the consequences or impacts, if you want to use that language in a more upfront as opposed to after approach to things? And so it's a struggle to get us, and I don't mean them out there, I mean us, which includes me, to begin to think about this kind of stuff, to use a terrible word. And how do we go from convenience? We do things out of convenience, habit, habitual, convenience, habitual words together. Or we do things because to do otherwise raises doubts. So now we go from habit to doubt. And once we begin to, infect our lives with doubt, now we begin to be afraid.
Yeah.
And there's the human psychology around how and why, how we make decisions, why we don't make decisions, why preparedness is a way of life, which is my understanding of lifestyle, because lifestyles are, what dress are you wearing this week?
Yeah, well, exactly. And it works on it, but it's the idea of people who take calculated risk are people who are more than likely successful than people who just assume a risk and go, hey, let's go left, let's go right, let's turn here, let's go there. But people to say, okay, there's a lot of fear in potential decision making of what comes next in my life, or what comes
Mhm.
next in the
Mhm.
business decision,
Mhm.
or my expansion. Where do I expand my logistics operations to? People take risks, succeed. Those that take calculated risk, that's the strategic thinking model that goes along with that.
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
who understand that there is no zero risk environment.
Right.
Even not making a decision is not a zero risk environment.
Exactly.
So it's balancing and understanding the risk, and then making a calculated decision as which is the most beneficial
Yeah.
versus potential
Yeah.
outcome,
Yeah.
and making a calculated risk. Once people take that idea that's reasonably well understood in business, and you translate that now to your personal life, and you say, okay, what are my opportunities? What are the things I'd like to check? What are the risks involved in the next step in my life and where I would like to go? What are the calculated risks? Depending on who I am, where I live, and whom I'm responsible for, that largely determines the amount of risk that I can assume. You know, if you're a single income family, you've got a mortgage, car payments, RV payment, whatever, you can't necessarily leap into selling lily pads because you think you're going to be a millionaire. Doesn't work. But some do, but those are usually fail. But the calculated risk saying, hey, listen, I can start a side hustle 2 hours a night and a couple
Sure.
hours on the weekend doing this thing to test the waters to see
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
it's a viable idea and strategy.
Yeah.
That's taking a calculated risk.
Yeah.
And I think when we start thinking about calculated risk outside of business and translate it into our personal lives, the
Mhm.
road actually is clear, right?
Mhm.
It becomes, there's less obstacles, less barriers, less fog, shall we say, on the road.
Mhm.
And then we go. It's like I have to deliver the ammunition forward.
Right.
Um, I don't have the option of not doing it. What's within my wheelhouse is the methodology I choose,
Yeah.
the time of day, the routes, the package, the
Yes.
equipment.
That's the process. Yeah.
I have a number of things that I have to put together in different recipes, let's call it that, to try to provide something. But I still have to provide the thing. I don't have the option of not doing that. So, you know, it's like if I run a warehousing, I can choose to never expand my warehousing operation. That's an option, right? I can
Sure it is.
perfectly stay exactly where I am,
Exactly.
serve the few customers that I have
That's right.
exceptionally well,
That's right.
and hang out.
Exactly. The real question, though, is why are you doing what you're doing?
Yeah,
Not why should you do something else? It's what is your motivation? What's
for
your
doing.
comfort zone
Yeah,
here?
yeah,
Right? If you're comfortable doing X, whatever it is, and I know people, I know companies that have chosen. I remember talking to a lot of their people have chosen to be the last 50 kilometers, period, full stop.
yeah.
They absolutely refuse to go beyond a certain limit in geographical limit.
Yep.
They said, we're comfortable here. We're making money. We're being successful. We're putting in all of the positive and value-driven capabilities that we can. We have satisfied customers, and this is what we do. That's it. Can we expand? Sure we can. Can we grow? Sure we can. Do we want to? No.
No, we're perfectly happy exactly where we are.
Exactly.
But is that in you know, if we think about that, this may be a great idea for next. Is that because they're actually comfortable for where they are, or is it because they have a personally insurmountable fear about doing something different?
Okay. There's the question, and we could probably leave it right
Yeah.
there so that everybody who listens to this can now go home and be worried.
Yes. Am I terrified?
Are you deciding because you're terrified, or are you deciding because you're comfortable?
Yeah.
And let's question your comfort level. Is your comfort based on the fact that you're actually terrified?
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
how Freudian do you want me to make this?
That's perfect. Perfect. It's a great pill to swallow.
All right. This is, as usual, great.
All right.
Talk to
Take care.
talk to you next week.